You've tuned in to the most crazy rocking metal podcast on the air. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Metal from the Inside.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Metal from the Inside podcast. I'm your host, Sydney Taylor. Thank you guys so much for tuning into another episode and joining me for another week. You guys are listening to episode 29 of the Metal from the Inside podcast. And yes, I have a brand new interview for you guys this week. But before I get into all of the different details, I really just wanted to say a sincere thank you to the wonderful comments and just overall reception of last week's episode with Mr. Joe Lynn Turner. Of course, one of the greatest hard rock vocalists, in my opinion, who sang with bands like Rainbow, Deep Purple, and of course has his own amazing solo career. And as I mentioned in last week's episode, that interview was very special to me, as Joe's music is very special to me and plays a really big role in my journey as a music fan and what it was like for me to personally become a rock and roll fan. So that episode was very special. That interview was very special to me in general, and it means so much to me to know that, aside from the fact that it was so special for me, that you guys enjoyed it so much. Right now we're at about 1,700 views on the YouTube version, which if you prefer to watch our conversations rather than just listen to them, you can go ahead and watch the interview with Joe on Metal from the Inside's YouTube channel. So we're at about 1,700 views there, about 250 subscribers on the YouTube channel as well, and just so many different comments on so many different platforms. I've gotten emails, messages, direct messages on Instagram, comments, and man, I'm just sincerely blown away by the wonderful reception on that interview, and especially the fact for me that that interview just means a lot to me, and I'm just really blown away by the kind words. So thank you guys so much. I also was really happy that you guys got a lot out of that interview. A lot of you were discovering a lot of things that Joe had done that you hadn't really heard of, especially Mother's Army, which in the interview we discuss is a project that Joe was a part of in the mid to late 90s. They did 3 records, pretty much a quote-unquote super group that consisted of Joe Lynn Turner, members of Night Ranger, Bob Daisley, of course, who worked with Ozzy Osbourne, and Carmine Appice. Just a really, really amazing group, and pretty much went unnoticed during that time period. Of course, we know because of grunge coming in and alternative and the music scene changing at the time, but I was really happy to speak with Joe about that subject. He's super passionate and enthusiastic about that project, and it was great to be able to have him go a little bit in detail on Mother's Army, and it made me very excited to hear that a lot of you actually discovered this group after listening to the interview. Listener Dennis Cook had responded and said that he just ordered all 3 of the Mother's Army albums, and Dennis is not the only one. I've gotten a couple of different messages and comments like that, and it makes me really happy that you guys walked away from that interview with something new to listen to, something that you maybe hadn't heard of before, and I'm sure that Joe is enthusiastic about that as well, as I know that he really loves that project. And man, I really do think that it was a very, very underrated project, and those records are extremely underrated. I know I say that a lot about a lot of the albums and projects that I love, but in all honesty, it's really true. I mean, it kind of just went under the radar, and they sang about a lot of really heavy stuff in those records, some really deep themes and deep lyrics, and of course, as we talked about in the interview with Joe doesn't really stray away from that kind of lyrical content even in his own solo records. So definitely listen to Mother's Army if you haven't. I'm getting a lot of positive feedback on that group, and that many people are really enjoying it, so I think that you will too if you haven't given it a listen yet. We also talked about the underrated Slaves and Masters, which getting a lot of great feedback on that record as well. One of the most underrated Deep Purple records, and records that Joe Lynn Turner did in general. One of my favorites, and I've gotten a lot of messages regarding that record, and the fact that some people hadn't really listened to it all the way through before, so that's another one. It really makes me happy to hear that you guys are walking away with some new knowledge and some new music that you haven't really heard before. So thank you guys so much on all of the love for that interview. It really means so much to me, truly from the bottom of my heart. heart. I wish I could properly express my thank you, but just know that it really, really means just so much to me. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And we're not done with Joe Lynn Turner yet, because hopefully he will be coming back on the show in the near future as the release of his brand new record comes a little bit closer. And he is tied into this week's episode as he is a guest on my guest's brand new record. This week I'm speaking to the one and only legendary hard rock and heavy metal guitarist Michael Schenker, who has played in bands, of course, such as UFO, the Michael Schenker Group, and of course his early days in the Scorpions in the 70s. So as many of you know, Michael Schenker is releasing his brand new record the same day you are hearing this episode, entitled Immortal, on January 29th. And as we know, Michael Schenker has always had a history of having different vocalists on all of his records. I am a huge fan of the Robin McAuley era, of course, as many of you know. I had Robin back on the podcast in October, and we chatted a little bit about his time with Michael Schenker. And over the years, Michael has been doing a lot of these Michael Schenker Fest shows. He's been bringing a lot of the different vocalists he's had over the years out on tour with him, including Robin, Graham Bonnet, Doogie White, a lot of different musicians that he's worked with. And on this brand new record, Immortal, he definitely doesn't stray away from bringing in other vocalists and having kind of an array of different talents on this record. And in the interview, we're going to get into why that came to be and how that actually wasn't something that was planned but ended up happening anyways. And Joe Lynn Turner is involved in this because he is a vocalist on the brand new record Immortal. So we have a little bit of a tie-in. Michael even chats a little bit about what it was like getting Joe on the project and recording songs for the record. So yeah, it's really, really exciting, and the record is fantastic. I mean, Michael Schenker can really do no wrong. He's one of the greatest guitar players. And getting this interview, again, I always like to tie in my perspective as a fan, because I think that that's so important. That's where all of my passion for doing this stems from. So I always want to bring in my own personal journey as a fan when I do these interviews, so I can really connect with you guys. And I am definitely a fan of Michael Schenker and his work, of course. As I just mentioned, I love the Michael Schenker Group, probably my personal favorite era of the Michael Schenker Group as a whole. And I mean, I love those records that he did with Robin. Save Yourself is one of my favorite records. Perfect Timing. They did a lot of really cool stuff together, and I know that sometimes that era gets a little bit of flack because people think that they went a little too commercial, but I love those records, and I think that Robin was such a welcome addition. So aside from those Michael Schenker Group records, I mean, of course, I've always been a fan of UFO and Michael's role in UFO. Doctor Doctor is one of my favorite songs of all time, as I know it is for many people, and that song is also really special to me because it's a big bonding song with my dad. We both love UFO and love those records, so that was something that really was cool and meant a lot to me when I got this interview, because I've been listening to those records for so many years, and I remember hearing Doctor Doctor when I was very young, and even then being like, oh my god, what's that? Like the melody and just everything that went along with that song and that group. And as I talked about before in the podcast and in other avenues, UFO is just such a groundbreaking band. They inspired everybody from Megadeth to Metallica, a lot of those early thrash records. If you guys haven't watched the documentary Murder in the Front Row, I definitely recommend doing so. It's a documentary all about the, Bay Area thrash scene in California in the early to mid 80s, and they really go in depth on UFO's influence on those thrash bands in that documentary. So, Kirk Hammett goes in depth on his influence and how, they were one of his favorite bands, and they just were really, really influential to that heavier rock scene that came into play in the 80s. I don't think that they get as much credit as they deserve. They could have been absolutely huge, I think, and it's funny, we actually just talked about this on an episode of the Sea of Tranquility channel that I'm on, the Hudson Valley Squares, which I'm sure many of you guys are aware of and know, but we just did an episode on bad decisions that bands had made during their career, and Michael Schenker leaving UFO was one of them that Pete Pardo, who runs the channel as a whole, brought up, and it's a fair point. Who knows what would have happened if Michael stayed in the band? Would they have gotten big? Who knows? So that's something interesting to think about, but of course, because of Michael leaving, we did get the Michael Schenker Group and all of those wonderful records, so, you have to lose something to gain something, so that's what happened there. But yeah, I mean, who doesn't love UFO? I think that you have to be crazy to not think that Strangers in the Night is one of the greatest live albums, if not the greatest live album that has ever been recorded. And it was just an honor and a pleasure to have Michael come on the podcast. You know, I always joke around, I'm like, younger me would never believe that I'm speaking to these incredible musicians and these incredible talents that I've been listening to throughout the years. So really such an honor to have Michael on the podcast, and a funny tie-in with last week's episode, you know, having Joe as a guest on this record, and plenty of other vocalists on this record as well. You know, Ronnie Romero, who plays with Rainbow now at the time, has also joined some other groups, was supposed to be the lead vocalist, and again, we're going to get into that in the interview, but he does a couple of different songs and is going to be going out on the road with Michael when live shows return. So we have Ronnie doing some songs, Joe's doing some songs, a bunch of different vocalists, and I think that you guys are really going to enjoy this record. It's really classic Michael Schenker, and again, we're going to get really in-depth on this in the interview in regards to Michael's inspiration for writing this record and, you know, how this ties into his 50th anniversary in the business. So really, really looking forward to having you guys listen to this interview. Before we get right into it, I wanted to speak a little bit about the brand new Eddie Van Halen mural that was just unveiled at the Hollywood Guitar Center, of course, on the Sunset Strip. And man, that mural is so beautiful. I thought I would mention it because, you know, we're talking about another legendary guitarist this week, you know, Michael Schenker, and I really wanted to just speak about how incredible this mural is. It was painted by the one and only Robert Vargas, who is such an incredible artist. He's done a lot of different tribute art over the years, and he just completely knocked this mural out of the park. They did an unveiling, I believe, on Tuesday of the mural at the Guitar Center again in Hollywood, and a bunch of different people kind of came out. They had a little bit of a socially distant event, and Robert spoke before they did the unveiling, and he really just has such a passion for Eddie and Van Halen. He told this really beautiful story about meeting Eddie and the fact that they had this conversation about the creative process and what it's like being an artist, and it was just so touching because he almost choked up a couple of times when he was speaking, and you could just see how much doing this mural meant to him and how much Eddie meant to him. So it was just really incredible to watch that, and this mural is so beautiful, and the resemblance to Eddie is just uncanny. It looks like it's a picture of Eddie on the wall, like somebody just, you know, pasted a huge picture of Eddie. It looks that real. So it's insane. If you haven't seen pictures of it, which I'm sure most of you have, I definitely recommend that you go and do that. But it's really funny because social media sometimes is such a toxic place, and it's seen in different events like this. You know, everybody has to have an opinion on something, and if you follow the big kind of rock media outlets, you probably saw this article, but somebody left a comment saying that it looked nothing like Eddie. You know, it's a bunch of people have been giving it shit. And Wolf Van Halen, of course, Eddie's son, who I can't even imagine what these past couple of months have been like for him, and rightfully so. He's been shutting down all of the negative, you know, comments, and people who have nothing better to do but leave their unwanted opinion on everything, which I give him major props because he has the complete right to do that. You know, he's dealing with this incredible loss, but he basically responded and was like, you know, I think you need some glasses because it looks just like him. I'm not really sure where people are getting it doesn't resemble him at all, because I think it looks just like a real picture, like somebody just slapped a photo on the wall, you know, rather than painted it. So, but that's the thing, I guess, that you learn when you're on social media for a long time, is that somebody is always going to have something to say, and a lot of the times it's going to be negative, unfortunately, which is kind of a shame. But man, I think Robert did such a fantastic job, and of course it is Wolf Van Halen approved. He commented on the mural saying that it was literally flawless and such an incredible tribute to his dad, which I don't think that you can have a higher approval than that. You know, Wolf knows his father better than anybody, and I think that Robert did such a fantastic job. So like I mentioned, I'm sure that many of you guys have seen the pictures of the mural, but if you haven't, be sure to go ahead and check it out, and better yet, if you can go visit the mural in person, go do that for sure. They have this really amazing feature. Basically, Robert teamed up with this really cool augmented reality company, and they installed a QR code on the side of the Guitar Center building. You basically scan it with your camera, you stand in the kind of spot that they labeled, that is where you're going to get the best results. You stand at that spot, and basically the mural becomes animated. And I've seen videos of this. A couple people have posted what the animation looks like, and holy crap, it's just insane what, you know, technology can do nowadays, and it's the coolest thing ever. So I'm across the country, so I can unfortunately not go and experience that. Hopefully one day when I get back out to LA after the craziness of this pandemic is over, I will be able able to do so. But if you have the opportunity, I would definitely recommend for you to go do that. And yeah, I just wanted to shout out that incredible artwork and Robert here on the podcast because it's just sincerely amazing and such an incredible representation of Eddie, and he is forever immortal, and it's beautiful. So it deserved a place on this week's episode of the Metal from the Inside podcast. Without further ado, I'm not going to have you guys wait any longer to hear my interview with the legendary Michael Schenker. We're going to get right into it after this short break. Like I mentioned earlier, we get into everything about the brand new record Immortal, the process and the inspiration behind creating the record, what it was like to, of course, record and write this record, and what was going on in the world, which was, of course, the pandemic, COVID-19, and just a little bit of Michael's history, his past, in his own words, what his career has been like, and what it's felt like leading up to the 50th anniversary of writing with the Scorpions, eventually branching out to UFO, his own group, the Michael Schenker Group, and everything else that he's been involved in his career. So a really interesting conversation if you are a UFO fan or Michael Schenker fan in general. I think you guys are going to really enjoy this week's episode. So stick around, because right after this short break, you guys are going to get right into my interview with legendary hard rock and heavy metal guitarist Michael Schenker. So if you guys haven't heard about Anchor, it's definitely the easiest way to make a podcast. When I started the Metal from the Inside podcast and was looking for sites to host it, I chose Anchor right away. It's 100% free, and Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and pretty much any other streaming service you could think of. Not only does Anchor track your plays and audience statistics across all platforms, but it allows you to record and edit podcast episodes directly from your phone or computer. If you're thinking about starting a podcast, I'd without a doubt recommend Anchor, as it's a one-stop shop for everything you need. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Metal from the Inside podcast. Joining me on the podcast this week is quite simply a hard rock and heavy metal legend. I'm so honored to have Mr. Michael Schenker calling in this morning, and of course known for his time in the Scorpions, UFO, and of course the Michael Schenker Group since the late 70s. So I appreciate you taking the time to join me this afternoon. How are you doing, Michael?
Thank you for having me, and considering the circumstances, with the virus, I'm doing okay.
Amazing. As I know, and of course you know as well, we're gearing up on the release of your most recent record, Immortal, which is going to be released on January 29th, which is about a week from when we're speaking. And such a fantastic record. And I, of course, want to get into the process of getting, what it was like for you to get this record together and, writing and recording. But first off, I know that the main reason behind this record was to initially celebrate the 50th anniversary of your career, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about that and just, what the process was like of deciding you wanted to do this record and just the meaning of it behind it for you.
Well, in 2019, I discovered that the 50th anniversary of my very first note I put on my ever very first recording with the Scorpions Lonesome Crow was in 1970, and so I knew that 2020 was the 50th anniversary, and but I was and my idea was to celebrate with the musicians, to celebrate the 50th anniversary with musicians, fans and friends from all over the world, and it was dragging on and on and on. And at some point, I thought I lost the timing because I realized it couldn't be released in 2020. And so I kind of almost gave up. And then my agent told me, yeah, but Michael, your album, the Scorpions Lonesome Crow album, was released in 1972. And so I said, so I have another 2 years to get it all together. and so I had hope again, but this time I decided to put a compact band together. I asked Ronnie Romero to sing all the songs on the album. I had Bill Shop on board, Steve Manberry, Sparks kept emailing me, I want to be your bass player. I said, you got it. And so I had a band, and to make it less problematic. And when I left the 70,000 tons of metal cruise in 2020, early 2020, I spent 4 days in Miami in a hotel. I started writing, and then I went to the UK, carried on writing. I was ready to leave and go, and then I I see on the TV screen that there was a problem. And the problem, of course, was the virus. And my usual route that I go by car via Eurotunnel and France, Belgium, Holland, and then make it to the recording studio at Michael Voss's co-producer. And I couldn't use the same route, so I had to look for a different one. And Holland wasn't a problem, so going to Harwich and taking a boat, sleep 7 hours, and then go through Holland, and then eventually I went to the recording studio, put down my new written musical compositions, and then it was time for Ronnie to start singing. And we called him up, and he said, "I'm sorry, I can't." Oh, by the way, every time I went to Germany, I had to do this 4 times via boat. Every time I came back to the UK, I had to go on 40 days quarantine, which was a total of 42 days.
Oh, wow.
Not in one go, but, yes, I tell you, it was quite something else. But if I hadn't done that, the album would have never happened. So, of course, it's Michael Schenker's 50th anniversary. I'm the band leader, and somebody has to sacrifice. So I did. And anyway, it was time for Ronnie to sing, and I called him up, and he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, the border so long." I think he lives in Bulgaria. I can't go on 14 days quarantine. I can't afford it. I have commitments, etc., etc. And he said, "Okay, don't worry. We call you back. We think of a solution." And my partner Amy, who's a bass player with a very good taste, and she's a music consumer. I haven't been listening to music for 50 years, so I don't know what's out there. And so I asked Amy, "Do you know anybody? Ronnie's not available right now. We are kind of stuck. Try Ralph Shippers." And so I said to Michael Voss, "What about Ralph Shippers?" "Absolutely." And the next day they were recording, and then they were even recording another vocal track. I went like, wow. And actually, then Brian Tichy calls up, one of the best drummers in the world. He played with Whitesnake and Ozzy, and etc.
Right.
He's a Michael Schenker fan, and he said he heard about the 50th anniversary. He offered 6 drum trucks. I said, "What?" I mean, I was blown away, And then he calls back Michael Voss again and says, a friend of mine, a buddy of mine, he's a keyboard player. His name is Sherinian, and he's a fan too, and he wants to make a contribution. And I said to Michael, "What are we going to do with a heavy-duty keyboard player like Derek? We already got Steve Mann. I purposely put all the guitars down myself, to keep it as much Michael Schenker as possible, especially for the 50th anniversary. And I asked Steve, who usually does the keyboards, just to put some color in here, and he agreed. And so I said to Michael first, "What are we going to do with Derek?" He said, "Well, maybe you can have a keyboard guitar jam." I said, "Well, keyboard guitar jam? I've never done that before." He said, "Well, maybe it's a good idea, something fresh, 50th anniversary, do something that you haven't done before, And I said to him, "You mean like Richie Blackmore and John Lord?" He said, "Yeah, something like that." I said, "Yeah, and maybe you're right, I got actually very excited. So we ended up doing that, and in the end, it became critical. When I heard Ralph's voice, I never even knew that there was a voice out there like that. I mean, I was absolutely blown away. And when I heard the final, and when it was all put together, the jam with Derek, I mean, I went like, what is going on here? I mean, this is unbelievable. This is coming out from nowhere. And then it was time for, to call Ronnie again. And "Are you ready, Ronnie?" "I'm sorry, I still can't. 14 days quarantine, I have obligations, I'm committed, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm locked up, I can't go anywhere." "Okay, don't worry. We call you back. We will look for a solution." And so he already lost 2 songs that he was originally supposed to sing for my compact idea. And so I said to Michael Voss, "What are we going to do now?" do you have any ideas? We are stuck. He said, what do you think of Joe Lynn Turner? I said, Joe Lynn Turner, one of my favorite singers. I mean, he's a fan, I'm a fan. The next day they were recording, and they were recording another song. I said to myself, what is going on here? This is unbelievable. And then one morning, I came back from the hotel to the recording studio, and Michael Voss, who always writes them like a beat plan for vocalists, like lyrics and melodies, just in case they get stuck, etc. He said, Michael, this is what I did last night to a power ballad, and actually I never had done a power ballad like that before ever, as far as I remember, which was like an additional new thing for a 50th anniversary. And so I don't know where it came from, it just showed up. But when I was writing, and he said, this is what I did, to the power ballad. And he played it to me and said, Michael, this is so beautiful, only you can sing this. And then there was another song called The Queen of Thorns and Roses, which was a very unusual song anyway. And Michael did something to it, and did some vocals to it. I said, Michael, I cannot see anybody else singing this song, And so I gave him those 2 songs. So that was 4 songs left for Ronnie. So it just went on like this. It was like, and then eventually, of course, Ronnie was available, and then of course he did a fantastic job with Night of the Dead and The Devil's Daughter and Come On Over, and then we also ended up in Search of Peace of Mind, and then he was also singing on the bonus track, which probably nobody has heard yet, which we use for additional, singles or tour promotion, etc., etc. And I mean, he just did an incredible job, on the vocals, and so and then there was In Search of the Peace of Mind, which became a very, very important song for the 50th anniversary, because I was 15 years old when I ever wrote a song. And I did it in my mother's kitchen. I was all by myself. And Michael Voss actually sent me the original credits from the Lonesome Crow Scorpions album, and it says Michael Schenker lyrics, Rudolph Schenker lyrics. I mean, Michael and Rudolph had zero knowledge of English. How could we have written any lyrics? To complete this information, all these years, for 50 years, people think that's what happened. And we should have set Michael Schenker music and whoever did the lyrics. On top of that, the song was called In Search of the Peace of Mind, and it became the theme of my life, looking for contentment, peace, and fulfillment, etc., etc. And on top of that, I played a lead break as a 15-year-old. I had no clue where it came from. It was so perfect, I would never change a note. Like Stairway to Heaven or the theme of the Imaginary Western. It happens sometimes that, a lead break is so complete, you will never have to change anything. And I could not understand why I was able to do this as a 15-year-old, because you can hear on Lonesome Crow, I'm an amateur, I'm 15 years old, I'm developing, and where did this lead break come from? I couldn't. Up to this day, I cannot understand it. I would never change a note, and I never did. And so altogether, it became, the most important song, because it was my very first musical composition, the first note I put on a recording ever in 1917 as a 15-year-old, 1970 as a 15-year-old, and it had that lead break on it, and it was just like, this song is so important, and so I decided that because it was the first note on that particular album, and by the way, the Scorpions never wrote any music until they actually never did. When I joined the Scorpions, I wrote just, play and discover, having fun putting three notes together, creating goose pimples, recreationally, no competition, not comparing, not looking for fame, not expectation, no nothing, just having pure joy with music, being an artist. And so I never looked around, if I was cheated or not, or what was right or wrong. It never concerned me. I only found out all of this wrongdoings in 2015 when the Scorpions asked me to help them with the 2015 Scorpions set box. And when I heard, and when I actually found out about the lies about the Love Track story, I was very disappointed in Rudolph. And, I supported Rudolph over the years, over 50 years, for so many years. More power to Rudolph. I was so happy that he was successful with so little talent as a guitar player, but he managed, and I was so happy all these years. But when I heard these lies, it opened a can of worms, and I discovered so many lies, that I was very, very disappointed. However, that song became so important for the reasons I told you that I actually wanted to make it an epic for the 50th anniversary of Michael Schenker, and I wanted to put some extra guitars at the end. And so I did. And I used howler and deep bending notes and any emotion you can think of. And when I listened back to it, it actually sounded like an inner conversation, like more than inner conversations, like making choices. Shall I go this way, that way? Should I do this or that? Should I sell out? Should I not sell out? By the way, in the middle years, I after I left the Scorpions Love Track album, I actually was contracted as a sixth member, and they never put the picture of me on their cover. I never found out until 2015. But I never knew about all of these things, and so basically they wanted to keep me in the band. Even though they asked me to help out because Matthias couldn't do it, and I said okay, and I helped them out. I opened the doors for America for them. I was already successful in America, and I wrote the hit Lights Out. It became a hit. I got scared. I ran away. Now the music business wants me to write hits. I wasn't happy with that. So I basically I had a very hard time because the Scorpions wanted to keep me in the band because of what I did for the Love Ride album, and all the management and the whole business in America was so excited about me being with the Scorpions, but then I wasn't there, and the Scorpions tried to manipulate me to stay with them, but I never agreed to that, and I just left UFO, at the peak, becoming one of the biggest bands in the world. Why should I go all the way again, to get to that point? I finished my first vision of developing as a guitarist, and I wanted to be my own person and carry on with my own vision rather than, chasing something that I was not interested in, fame and success and money, etc., etc. And so I stayed true to my vision and created in my middle years, did acoustic instrumentals, electric instrumentals, and cover versions with incredible musicians. And so, by the time all of that came to the end, I felt complete and fulfilled, and I'm so glad I did, because I could have never done that with Ozzy or Aerosmith or Deep Purple or Pilgrimage or Motorhead or you name them. So many people asked me. I'm a Ozzy Osbourne fan. I love him, but I had to decline. I was his first choice because of when he wrote. Was a Michael Schenker fan. So Ozzy called me in the middle of the night and asked me to help out, and I was tempted, but I had to remember the times, how hard it was for me to break away from the Scorpions, staying with Rudolph and Klaus and help them to, experience the same success I had with UFO. And so I had to say, I'm sorry, I can't do this, and the same with Deep Purple. I actually was the first choice for Ozzy, and I was the same choice in '93 for Deep Purple. I had to decline for the same reason, and there is another story to that, because I was actually, in '93, I was approached by the Scorpions to help them with a European Japan tour to sell tickets, and it was a bit of a trickster, because they made it look like a reunion, but I was only playing acoustic guitar. They just wanted to sell out halls and venues, and at the same month, I had Phil Monk showing up, completely devastated, completely destroyed. He completely destroyed UFO, asking me, Michael, can you please help me to refuel UFO? I said, okay, and I had some conditions, and I said, only if you give me 50% of the name UFO, so you don't destroy UFO again. He agreed, and then we did Walk on Water. And another thing was that it had to be the original lineup, including Ron Everson. And Walk on Water was a fantastic album. Everybody was happy, and then Phil Mock, got better, and then he wanted control again. And eventually, in 2002, we had a few attempts, to do, Covenant and Sharks, but I always warned Phil, don't do UFO reunions without the original chemistry. It will not happen, and it never did. And so in 2002, he asked me for the name back. I gave it to him for free. I said, God bless you, here is the name. I was happy as Michael, and I would have thought that he was happy as the UFO owner. And the Scorpions should have been happy with all the success that they had in the world, after I left and went my own humble journey as an artist, staying true to myself. And then something happened, in 2007 or 2008, like my brain kind of, I look at it as a piling system, like a clock. It ticks, 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 and then eventually everything from the past comes back to the foreground again. And all of a sudden I was 16, 18, 20 years old again. And so I wanted to go back to where I came from. I wrote a lot of metal music. If you actually take Phil Mock's voice away from what I did from the whole period of my development with UFO, you can hear a lot of heavy guitar playing, but the vocals of Phil actually watered it down. But it became a very, very, very incredible, interesting chemistry between those two combinations, plus the raw bass playing of Pete Ray and the charisma and everything. And so I have been a Zeppelin fan, the Purple fan, a Black Sabbath fan, and Rory Gallagher, Johnny Winter, and all the 60s guitarists, and so I wanted to go back, to that, and I did, step by step, and I went all the way down to eventually Michael Schenker's Temple of Rock, and then Michael Schenker Fest, and actually, and Michael Schenker Group as well. But everything is actually Michael Schenker Group, because everything always starts with Michael Schenker's writing. But these are just subtitles, It actually helps me to categorize understanding and the fans, understanding which the hell of the lineup, because Michael Schenker had so many different band members and lineups, and so that the first Michael Schenker Group was with Simon Phillips, Mo Foster from Jeff Beck. Then there was MSG, which was with Cozy Powell and Chris Glenn and Paul Rayner from UFO, and so on. And then there was the Macaulay Schenker Group, and I gave Robin Macaulay the M. I didn't care if I had the first M or not. And so, but even that is Michael Schenker Group. And then, it went to Michael Schenker's Temple of Rock. That is Michael Schenker Group. It's just a subtitle to help people, what it means. For instance, Michael Schenker's Temple of Rock means that was with Herman Rerde, Francis Buchholz, ex-Scorpions, and Gibby White, ex-Rainbow, Michael Schenker cast is all the original 80s singers with singing to my original compositions, and so, and eventually it came to the 50th anniversary of Michael Schenker, and with the different plans I had, it turned out like a gift from heaven. I could have never done this for myself. It almost feels like, Michael, this is a gift from the universe, a gift from heaven for you staying true to yourself with all these temptations and never selling out, and really make this happening for you. And I tell you, I could have never done this for myself. I am so happy with that gift, I must say.
Yeah, really quick too, before I let you go, because you were just talking about all those lineups about, of course, the Michael Schenker Group. You had a bunch of different lineups that, all were Michael Schenker, even Macaulay Schenker too. But, you had different singers on this new record, different, band members. So, as you mentioned before, you thought that this was going to be like the 50th anniversary. You realized you had about 2 years to really soak it in. And hopefully eventually we'll get back to live shows in that time period. And I know it's still a little bit away, to be thinking about that. But when it comes to band members, do you think that you will bring out, these members that worked with you on the record to do live shows when the time comes? Bring Joe Lynn Turner, bring Ronnie on the road, or, are you going to pull from these different lineups that you've had over the years?
Oh, no, the lineup of the Mike, we actually have eventually the agent put together a tour for October in 21, and we're also doing the Michael Schenker, the Hellfest in France and Grasspop, which are two of the biggest festivals in Europe. They had to postpone from 20 to 21, but we are still on the bill in June 21, and if it happens. And we have a tour together for October 21, which is the Michael Schenker 50th anniversary Immortal, performed by the current MSG Michael Schenker Group. So it will be done. The vocalist will be Ronnie Romero, and we have we have 4 shows in the UK. With Dora Pesh, a special guest, and then we have 5 shows in Europe. Russia is showing up. Australia, I'm getting so many. I've never been to Australia. I get so many phone calls from Australia for interviews. I cannot believe it. And Mexico and places, it's just unbelievable. And I just heard from Markus Motzky from America Blast that this album is becoming a bestseller. It's unbelievable. It's just like, as we are talking, I would imagine, with the vaccine being available and things maybe, becoming better sooner than later, that everything will go ahead and God bless all the other bands, to have to go back on the road and the fans, of course, to be able to enjoy what they enjoyed before. And so, as we talk, they put in the USA together, they put in South America together, Australia, Japan. It's the funny thing is, the older I get, the more I have to do. It's unbelievable. I've never done 3-hour shows before until I was 60. Why when I'm 60? Why do I have to stay on stage for 3 hours? And all of a sudden, it looks like it's going to become the longest tour ever in my life. And now I'm 66. Why? Why now? But the good thing is, it keeps me on my toes.
Yeah.
It keeps me in shape, and it keeps me focusing on keeping in shape. And because of that, it keeps you on your toes. It is actually a very unique design.
Yeah, though, the album is titled so perfectly, I mean, your music and everything that you've done really is immortal, and, you're seeing that right now with all of this demand and wanting you to play and tour and, revisit all of these different eras of your career and just everything you've done. So, like I said in the beginning, I love the record. I think it's so great and really is just a perfect, 50th anniversary kind of, sum up and regroup of your entire career and, everything that is about Michael Schenker. So I know you also have other interviews coming up, so I don't want to keep you too much longer, but I'm really excited to, see that release, and it's really cool.
Yeah, but the funny thing is, Immortal, the album title, doesn't even come from me. It comes from Nuclear Blast. Nuclear Blast in Germany is Michael Schenker pens. All the artists, most of the artists, are Michael Schenker pens. And the boss, the owner of Nuclear Blast in Germany, who created Nuclear Blast, Marco Steiger, said to me one day, Michael, if you wouldn't have been, he would have never been. Nuclear Blast would have never been. He would have never started thrash metal. I said, what? I was blown away because I'm hearing this now. I mean, I never heard anything like that before on my career. Maybe it was good not to disturb me on that level. But, I got Australia making interviews saying if I wouldn't have been thrash metal, death metal, and all of these different metals would have never existed. I went, what? And then in the 90s when I found out that Slash and, Def Leppard and Cold Hammered and Jane, I've got a mental block now. and all of these guys were complete Michael Schenker pens, and I was blown away. It was beyond my expectations. So it's an icing on the cake. It's just like I cannot believe that. I mean, if you take from a trend, you can exhaust the trend because the trend is something everybody's doing. Take a piece of the pie, become selling to the stereotype commercial musicians making money, being famous, being in the spotlight on the moment, And the way I went, I bypassed all of that expectations or, wanting to be part of that. And as a result of it, I got all of these information much later in my life that is unbelievable. And, I actually became a trend maker because in the 80s, most people were copying my guitar style. And so if I would have never found my infinite spring of creativity, being Michael Schenker, putting three notes together, creating Bluespin Boots and being focusing on pure self-expression. The trend would have died a long time ago. The musicians know where I'm coming from, what I'm doing. They always take things from me, and they actually overexposed my guitar playing in the 80s. By the time I was playing it, it was already done. But I always step ahead because I go to the inner spring of creativity, and so I always add something new, some fresh colors to the still existing trend that could have died a long time ago, like a ditch, if you don't put fresh water in it, it will die. And so, all I can say is keep on walking and keep it all alive.
I could not agree with you more. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this and speak with me today. Like I said, I'm so excited for the audience and, everybody else to hear this record because it's so fantastic. And it was such an honor to speak with you and have you on the podcast. I've been listening to your music for years, and it was a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.
You guys just finished listening to my interview with legendary hard rock and heavy metal guitarist Michael Schenker. As I mentioned earlier on in the episode, Michael's brand new record, Immortal, is out now on January 29th, and this record features so many amazing talents, of course, from Ronnie Romero, Joe Lynn Turner, Ralph Sheepers, Michael Voss, Steve Mann, Brian Tichy, Gary Barden, so many different artists. The list goes on and on and on, so be sure to go ahead and check the new record, Immortal, Immortal out now. As always, thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen to this week's episode and, of course, my interview with Michael. Michael is such a fun interview and just a legend. It was a complete honor to have him on the podcast. As I described earlier on, Michael Schenker's music has just been such a huge part of my life and, music that I've listened to over the years. So it was really such a pleasure to have him on, of course, to talk about this new record and just his background and his career as a whole. Really just an honor, and I'm really happy that you guys took the time to listen to it, and I hope that you guys enjoyed the conversation as well. As always, if you really did love what you heard and are interested in donating to the Metal from the Inside podcast, you can go to www.anchor.fm/Metal from the Inside. Here, you can click on the support button and donate either $1, $5, or $10 a month directly to the podcast. Every single dollar that I receive goes directly back into creating for you guys and continuing to produce even better episodes. So if you are interested in donating, that is how you go about it, but a donation is by no means necessary. The podcast is available for 100% free on every single streaming service, on Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, Amazon, anywhere that you get your podcasts. So it's by no means a requirement to donate to listen. I just always like to have that option there for those that are interested. If you'd like to stay up to date with everything that's going on with Metal from the Inside and the podcast, the most important place to do so is at www.metalfromtheinside.com. We're also on social media, on Instagram at Metal from the Inside, on Twitter at MFTI Official, and on Facebook as well. You can like our official Facebook page. Metal from the Inside is also available on YouTube as well, as I mentioned earlier on in the episode. If you guys just go to YouTube and type in Metal from the Inside, we will come right up, and here is where I will be sharing all of the visual aspects to all the interviews that I do. A lot of the times we will do Zoom calls, and I will just translate the visual and the audio to YouTube so you guys can actually watch the interview instead of just listen to it. So all of the actual videos of every interview will be up on our YouTube channel for you guys to watch, and I will also be sharing the audio to any interviews that unfortunately do not have video, like this Michael Schenker interview. Some artists just want to do over the phone conversations instead of a video chat, so all of the audio will be up on YouTube as well, so you guys can access it there. So if you are interested, be sure to hit subscribe on Metal from the Inside's YouTube channel. It helps algorithm, it helps engagement, everything like that. So be sure to go ahead and check that out if you are interested. If you'd like to stay up to date with me, Sydney Taylor, in real time, I'm on Instagram at Sydney Anna Taylor and on Twitter at STaylorOfficial. You can also contact me by hitting the contact tab on Metal from the Inside's website. Every single email that you send through that sheet will go directly to me, and it's been really cool. I've been getting some awesome emails from listeners and just having conversations about music, and it's been really, really great getting to interact with you guys that way. So if you would like to reach out, the contact tab is the way to do it. I also answer my messages and direct messages on Twitter and Instagram all the time as well, so that's another avenue to reach me if you would like to. Thank you everybody again for taking the time to listen and to support the podcast. The first month of this year has been insane, and I am just so excited for this year. It feels like this is going to be such a good year for the podcast, and just for interviews I have coming in, it just feels really, really good, and I'm so inspired and just so excited to get stuff out there for you guys, and I really appreciate the support more than you know. I say that a lot, but I don't really know how to properly express it other than just thanking you guys from the bottom of my heart, especially with last week's episode. Like I mentioned at the beginning of episode 29, I have just been blown away by the kind words that I've received on the Joe Lynn Turner interview and all of the just really sweet messages, because it just means so much to me to know that you guys are enjoying listening to these as much as I enjoy putting the podcast together and scheduling things and, being creative in that aspect. So it means a lot to me to know that you guys enjoy listening to these as much as I enjoy, getting the content out there for you guys to begin with. So your support does not go unnoticed. I read every single message and comment. So thank you guys so much. There is so much more coming to the podcast. I have a lot of really great guests lined up, some really big guests, some really awesome guests that are in other professions than just being a musician that I have coming up on the podcast. And I'm scheduling new stuff every day, so new stuff is always in the works. I think that you guys are really going to enjoy the next couple episodes that we have coming up. So be sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen, and be sure to also share this interview with Michael Schenker with any of your metalhead friends, especially any friends that might love UFO or the Michael Schenker Group. So big thanks to you guys for taking the time to listen to this week's episode. We'll be right back here on the Metal from the Inside podcast 1 week from today. You guys know the drill. New episodes released every single Friday. I will see you guys very soon for episode 30 of the Metal from the Inside podcast. Have a great rest of your week. Talk soon and rock on.